thank you so much for tuning in. Really lovely to see you here, and we hope it'll be a useful chance for you to ask some questions and think a little bit about the best way forward. You'll see we've got various guests as well as David Hallen, of course you'll know. I'm delighted that Karl is able to join us from Exeter University. He is the head of school relationship there. And we also have Andrew MacKenzie, who's worked in gap years for a long time, and I will let him introduce himself as time goes on. The format this evening will be David will just talk a little bit about the UCAS situation. I will talk a bit about the kind of the general landscape and how it's looking, and then we'll hand over to Karl and Andrew to introduce themselves, and then we'll just go to questions. So I hope that sounds like it'll be a useful format. Let me just let one person in. So, David, I'm going to be on admitting duty. And if you're happy just to talk a little bit about things from your perspective, that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Beth. And thank you for putting all of this together. I think it's a really valuable thing for students and parents and for all of us to be able to share a few views, at least, about what's potentially going to be the landscape in September, October time when higher education kicks off again. And I think it really is important just to say at the beginning that although we are going to be sharing with you the very most up-to-date information that we have, it's all, a lot of this is subject to change still, and we just need to be kind of conscious that we're working with that caveat through this meeting as well. Yeah, so I'm going to give you a bit of a brief overview on the UCAS situation and also on results day, and just bring you up to speed with a couple of very minor changes that have happened, and essentially just kind of set the scene so that you're aware of what's going on. There won't be any changes that we're aware of a fundamental nature, certainly, to results day, nor to the UCAS process. And UCAS have gone out of their way to reassure advisors and universities and you guys as well in year 13s that it's absolutely business as usual for results day, and the process will stay the same, even though there are obviously changes on the ways in which your grades are being generated. So, results day, woohoo, 13th of August. It's going to be slightly different in that it will start, or results won't be released until 8 AM, which is a little bit later than normal. And that just means that you won't necessarily, as students, be able to get your results as soon as you would have done in previous years, or maybe as early as you did for your GCSEs. But it does mean that there might be a little bit of overlap between what you see on your UCAS track and your results. Possibly you might know whether you've gained a place before you know what your results are. Maybe that might happen the other way around. But not to fear. We are all still here for you on results day. We will be in, you will be able to, government decisions notwithstanding, come on in as well, and we'll be able to support you through that process. We're in a bit of an unknown situation as far as results go in broad terms. Obviously, the centre assessed grades that the schools completed across the country and that we've uploaded will give us an idea of what we think you should be getting. We don't know whether or not or how those grades might be changed between the time they've left us and by the time they arrive with you on results day. That's our little kind of slightly grey area, if you like, that we can't really comment on. We as a school are confident that you will achieve the grades that you are expected to achieve. And anything kind of that isn't perhaps expected, or anything that comes out of the blue on results day, would probably be very similar to the odd out of the blue result that comes through anyway under normal circumstances. And we as a school, universities are very much geared up to deal with that and to be ready for that should that happen. You've got a few options on results day that I'll just really briefly touch on for you. I'm very happy to talk in more detail if you have questions. the vast majority of the students here on results day either get the results that they were expecting and therefore make the progress into HE that they were anticipating making. You know, their firm choices, or in some cases their insurance choices are met, and there they go, they're there. Sometimes, occasionally, as with life, results are a bit better than people were anticipating, results not quite what people were hoping for. And in either case, it's very often the case that universities, certainly at the moment, are happy to make good on their offers, even if you haven't quite achieved the grades that perhaps you were hoping for or predicted. And that's all very normal. And the normal mechanisms for dealing with that are still in place. So on results day, we'll be there to help you whether or not you've done better than you'd expected, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I've done a lot better. I might want to change my my journey, my pathway, my options for HE, in which case we're there to help you with the system that's called adjustment, and we'll make sure you've got the information you need for that before the day. Perhaps more commonly known as clearing, and clearing serves lots of different purposes, and it's I don't know, Bethan, maybe you kind of agree with me on this one, I don't know. It's kind of gone from many years ago being something that people thought, oh my goodness, I've failed, I'm in clearing. And very much now, clearing is a strategy. It's part of the process for almost everybody in some way. And lots of you might think to yourself, actually, I really think that clearing might be the way to go, regardless almost of what your results are. And clearing just literally means that we have the opportunity to start fresh, to pick some new choices, sometimes one, sometimes more than that, depending on your situation. And gives you the opportunity to look at what's available on results day and work with us as school staff and work with universities as well that you're interested in finding different pathways if that's what is right for you on the day. And both of those things will still be running as normal. As far as clearing goes, you're only eligible for clearing for that process if you're not holding any offers that have been met or that have been agreed, let's say, by universities. So if you've got offers and you've accepted them for 2020, then you're not automatically eligible for clearing. The expectation is that you're going to carry on with that as normal. If you don't meet any of the requirements for those offers, if you find yourself not getting a place, then you're eligible for clearing, absolutely. Or if you decide that you want to decline those places and make a fresh start, you have the opportunity of doing that through clearing as well. Although, as Mrs. Ferguson very wisely pointed out to me, don't get rid of the offers that you have. You have a firm idea of exactly what you're going to be able to do, but you don't want to throw away something that you don't have. My message really is that we're in a time of change, and family circumstances might be changing around you all the time. Financial circumstances might be changing. Geographical issues might be coming up that you hadn't anticipated. And it's, I'm sure our colleagues from the sector will say that it's not unlikely for there to be a significant number of students nationally who are all thinking about a change in their circumstances, and maybe clearing will actually be quite an exciting and quite a powerful force in this year's results and destinations. Deferring is very much still on the table. However, most of you who are deferring have already planned to do that. And it may be that we want to discuss a little bit later on whether or not that's still the right thing to be doing. We've had a number of students in the upper six over recent weeks make changes to the idea of deferring and perhaps jump into higher education when they weren't planning to, because maybe that's not the right thing for them. Equally, it may be that this is the ideal time, and we'll talk about that a little bit this evening. I think the main thing to remember before I pass on to Bethan is that the landscape is changing all the time. It's not a normal year, but for all of the uncertainty that you've felt, I think, over the last few months, all of the processes that will get you to where you want to go are the same as they have always been in essence. What will be different is what the landscape looks like when you arrive in September, October. And I think it seems a good point to sort of hand over to Beth and have a bit of a chat about that.
Thank you, David. Yes. And actually what I'd really like to do is just summarise a little bit the stuff that we know about what universities are trying to provide and what gap years might look like. Because I think on the whole, the question that we need to answer is what's the best use of the year that you've got ahead? What would be the most useful way that you could use this year? And you know, it has been an extraordinary time, and the media has been reporting all sorts of things that aren't necessarily the way situations are going to end up. So I thought I would just summarise a few things just to highlight to you. First of all, it's likely that all universities will be offering some sort of blended learning programme. Universities have been offering lectures online for a long time, but it's been alongside lectures that you can go to in person. And it seems to me from what universities are saying is that those big lectures that might have 300 people in them will be offered online, and maybe they might move towards a slightly more sophisticated sort of lecture involving not just one person standing in front of a screen, but you know, other things going on. But that will certainly be part of it. There was a survey in mid-June of all the UK universities, and 95% of them said that they would be providing some sort of in-person smaller group teaching alongside those lectures, those online lectures, starting in the September term. We don't know what the detail of that will look like, but the impression I get is that universities are working very hard to provide something alongside, or something very significant actually alongside that kind of online provision. And they are absolutely actively expecting students to be on campus, and they're adapting accommodation and catering provision in line with what the government guidelines are likely to be at that point. I guess there are real questions about what university life will be like, and I think we can all imagine that the big Freshers' Week type activities will need to be different. But in the same survey that I mentioned earlier, 87% of universities are stating that they will offer in-person social opportunities, including outside events and sporting activities. Obviously, you know, all in line with what the government is saying about keeping safe. But we're certainly not looking at students just, you know, plugging into an online lecture, sitting alone in their halls of residence and never meeting anybody. So, you know, I think that's a really clear message that needs to be made. In terms of gap years, it's very difficult to imagine how the year will unfold. And obviously we are expecting that travel opportunities will be limited. I'm sure that the gap year industry and gap year organisations will be working very hard to develop new opportunities, and I'll be really interested in Andrew's thoughts about that. But we need to recognise that airline travel might well be restricted. Airlines might be going bust. There might not be the same access to places around the world, and I guess insurance might also be, you know, more of a consideration. There's been a lot of talk about students deferring, more and more students deferring, but in fact the numbers released by UCAS yesterday show a rise in the number of students expecting to start in September. Now, it might be the case that they're waiting to see what the provision will be like, so they're holding on to their university place, and they might change their mind at the last minute. But you know, in terms of what the press was talking about, you know, lots and lots of people not going to university this year, this doesn't seem to be the case. I think just one other thing we need to think about in terms of what a gap year might look like this year is that you know, many students will spend half of their year in casual work, earning money that they can spend in the rest of it, And I guess that might be more difficult with graduates not necessarily being employed when they leave university into graduate jobs, and doing the Waitrose gig or working in the local bar, the kind of job that somebody who leaves school might do. So I guess that's the landscape as it seems to be now. I'm delighted that we've got two experts here. As we move forward into the question time bit, I'm going to expect you people to be able to unmute yourselves. I think you can. If you can't, oh no, I think you can. So that should work. Because how are you going to tell me if you can't? If you can't, actually, you can just type something into the message bar, and I'll make sure you're unmuted. Okay, so has anybody got a question to start us off? I've always got questions, so I can always start myself. But if any of you have got one, it would be lovely to hear it. Nick, Mr. Cusack, I feel I should call you in this forum. Did I see you wanting to ask a question or not? Sorry, no, you haven't. Okay. Well, maybe I could start off, Karl. It would be really interesting to know. Obviously, you can't speak for the entire university sector, but in terms of the advice that you're being given by government about the way that you would regard grades when you get them, are you able to speak to some of our parents and students about the guidance that you're being given by government?
Yeah. So hello, thank you for inviting me tonight. It's great to see so you're here. I know that it's quite warm and sunny, and the temptation is to do something different. My name is Karl. I work at the University of Exeter, and my role is to provide information, advice and guidance to schools and students across the UK. And I head up the team who engage in that throughout the year. In terms of the question is about how we handle grades and how that may differ from, I guess, previous years. The initial answer is that from the university point of view, the process is going to be very much the same. So we will receive the results before the students do. We receive the results a few days before. We're able to do our analysis on achieved grades. So the point in which we receive them, those are the attained grades by those students. And we will then compare them to the offers that we've made to the students. In some cases, as we have seen in the last few years, we are flexible in those offers. So in some cases, even though students don't meet the actual stipulated offer that we've provided to the students, we have some flexibility. And you're probably wondering, why is that happening? Over the last few years, we have seen across the UK a dip in the number of 18-year-olds, so a demographic dip in the number of 18-year-olds. So what we have noted is less students applying to university. So obviously the competitiveness for places has reduced a little bit, and that's allowed universities to have some flexibility at the point of confirmation and clearing in August. You're lucky this year that we're still in that dip, and this year's the lowest number of 18-year-olds in the UK for the last 20 years. It starts going up again. So in future years, that message will change again. But for this year, you're in the lucky position that there will be flexibility across the entire sector. And certainly, to reiterate the messages put forward earlier in relation to clearing, there will be opportunities for students to seek fantastic courses across top universities through clearing. And it's very much looking at, doing a lot of research, looking out at what is available, and looking at whether the choices you've made, whether there are opportunities to be able to change them. If you so wish to do so, that opportunities will be there. And most, if not all, universities will have places in clearing. So we expect there to be a large number of places coming through in August. So that's a long answer to the question, which was, how are we treating the grades? Well, when they get to us, they'll be exactly the same as previous years. we get those grades, there will be achieved grades from those students, and we'll treat them in the same manner.
Thank you, Karl. That's great. And I realise actually I did say that I would give you both a chance to introduce yourself at the beginning, and I haven't done that. But thank you, Karl. Andrew, would you be able to just give us an idea of your experience and what you do in terms of gap years? That would be really useful.
Yes. Well, first of all, we are called Africa and Asia Venture, and so we do what we say on the tin, if you see what I mean. So we do only run programs in Africa and Asia. Very briefly, we've been going for 25 years. We've had over 6,000 people from 30 countries come with us, but we are very small, so we won't do more than 100 people a year, probably. And all of our programs are what we call group-based full immersion ones, where we build groups, small groups, typically between, let's say, 5 and 8, something like that, and they will live together and work together right in the community. And in terms of the work they do, really everything we do is working in schools with primary and secondary school kids, typically helping them read, write English, and then do any other academic subjects they may want to do, but also extracurricular activities. Now, as far as the situation is now, obviously, what we're saying to people is what you said, Bethan, about flights and all the rest of it. Clearly is very true, and we know no more than anybody else does at the moment. But the way we're proceeding and hoping is that things will, that a new normal will develop, and that new normal, we hope by the new year, will mean that people can travel. After all, it is in everybody's interest. Every community that we go to, every country that we go to, tourism is a huge part of their economy. So I think we'd agree that everybody wants things to start again, but I do agree there may well be problems. So at the moment, what we're seeing and what we're saying to young people is that we are hoping that we will be going again in the new year. But what we're doing with young people is we're not taking any money, if you like, off anyone. So we're in a situation where we're talking to people and we have them on hold, and we will continue to do them. But until we know that the country that they're interested in is open, there's not a lot more we can do. I think the insurance issue could be one as well. I mean, we all know what insurers are like. They'll all definitely try and not pay out when they should pay out. And we, for example, on our liability insurance have, a coronavirus rider has been introduced. Well, what a surprise.
Yeah.
But you have to live with these things. So we're reasonably. I should also say that although we have programs starting normally in August, September, and then January, February, and then April, May, historically, the majority of people have actually departed with us in January, February. And so, yes, they have worked from, the end of next week or whatever, through to Christmas. So far, and this is only anecdotal evidence, okay, so the young people we're talking to, they are getting jobs at, Tesco's or wherever it is, fruit picking and so on. And we happen to believe that it's actually a key part of their experience with us, that they do work, they do earn the money themselves. It's an experience which is good for them and actually then sits well on their CV when they're talking to employers and all the rest of it. So it is happening, but I agree with you. I think it is very difficult, and it's very difficult to plan. And from that point of view, we're saying to people, talk to, as we would always say, talk to friends and relatives who have taken a gap year, see what they got up to, do your research, start talking to people. But I think the answers they're going to get are pretty much what I've said, is that, now in terms of the UK, so of course there are opportunities for people if they want to go volunteering in the UK. There are opportunities that they can do. clearly I have an axe to grind here. Our point is that the experiences that we're talking about are taking people right outside their comfort zone, and that's a key part of what we do. But I think there are opportunities. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Andrew. So we've heard from universities and gap years. If any of you've got questions, do ask one, or you can type one into the little chat bar, and I can ask it on your behalf if that's useful. Oh, Mr. Hallen, yes.
I was just going to ask, Karl, we've got this situation which is kind of unprecedented in October, well, yeah, September time, October time, where we have resits and exams for students who would normally be well out of education, certainly in our sector by then. And I'm just wondering what effect that might have, or what the response of the university might be to students who are going to do a resit or take an exam. It's not even a resit, really, is it? When they wouldn't normally be doing it, when in fact they would almost by then be with you, and how that is being viewed by universities and the sector as a whole.
So that's a very good question. There is difficulty at the moment in understanding how that will work. The first part is we haven't had full details of when those taking those examinations, when that will happen exactly, and then the turnaround following those exams, how quick those exams will be marked, how universities or institutions will receive those sort of grades. So given that, for example, our term time starts in the middle of September, it will be difficult to see how that particular student would be able to start with that year group at that particular point in time. And it could be that we are looking at phased starts for several courses. It could be that we may be able to do a phased start for some places, and it could be a January start, for example, that may happen. But certainly we don't have enough detail at the moment in terms of that timeline and when those exams are going to take place, how quick we'll be able to get those results from Ofqual and whoever else is involved in that to be able to then pass on sort of places to that. And so the honest answer is our places have been awarded as normal for September entry, and we will look at the results coming out in August, and then we will look at whether any further students do come through, whether they start in January, whether we delay the start in September in order to capture those students too.
Thank you. And it's such a difficult situation in terms of a student's access into higher education, where they feel as though they've maybe not quite got the grades they would have expected to get, and their chance to prove themselves means that they maybe miss a bit of a window. And I guess that takes me into a sort of a gap year question, although it's kind of to Karl as well. I'm sorry, Andrew, which is just that if we've got students, and I know there's students on with us now who are sort of planning and still going with a gap year this coming year with entry 2021, I'm sort of making an assumption that admissions tutors are going to recognise when those applications come in September, October, November, that the richness of a gap year that may have been and now hasn't been able to happen is perhaps not going to disadvantage them in a way. You know, is that fair to say?
Absolutely. We are mindful of the restrictive opportunities that students will have had over the next few months or year, and we're very much aware that perhaps things will change and the opportunities they may have had in the past may not exist. However, what we strongly advise students, whatever they do with a gap year, whatever they choose to do, whatever experience they choose to undergo, is to reflect on the skills they acquire through that gap year. So, and those skills can be transferable to different situations. So those skills can be acquired through very different settings. It doesn't necessarily have to be their planned gap year that would have only developed those skills. You can still do volunteering in your community at the moment, and you're able to do that through volunteering through the local communities, and that will still develop those skills. So in terms of communication, leadership, all those things that we're looking for, that make you an all-rounded applicant for when you come to university, you can still develop those in very different ways. So very much it's for students whose plans for that gap year may change. It's using that time wisely and saying, okay, what do I do with my time instead that isn't just, and I'm sure that nobody will do this, but isn't just sat in front of a TV for a whole year. What do I do with that time that will develop those skills, will enable me to be able to go to my university, whichever one you've chosen to go to, and say, this is what I've developed in that time. This is how I maximized the use of my time. This is what I did in those months to be able to develop those skills. And this is what I bring to the table in terms of a student at your university. And that is what we will then want to see in that personal statement, that reflection that says, this is who I am, this is what I bring as an applicant, these are the skills that I carry in my bag, and this is how I acquire them.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really useful. And actually, just a question for you, Andrew. In terms of university summers are much longer than school summers. How short can your programs be? I mean, I know there is real value in a longer placement. You get to know people, you become much more confident in those situations. But from your perspective, if somebody came to you and said, "Can I do something just for 3 months?" Is that?
Yes, I mean, our most popular programs are 12 weeks plus in, apologies if you can hear a dog barking, sorry. 12 weeks plus in duration, but no, we do also run 5-week programs through the summer, which actually have been quite popular with undergrads as well. So yeah, there are, I mean, these days, to be perfectly honest, people can go from anything from, 2 weeks, I mean, even a week, I'm sure with some. I would question the value, but
yes, yeah,
no, you can go. But the shortest we tend to offer is 5 weeks.
Yes, yeah, thank you, that's very useful. We've got a question, so let me read it out. Some universities, this is a student writing, some universities have decided that lectures will be online all year round. Is this something that Exeter will be doing? And this is somebody who's actually applied to Exeter. And she does say that, she does divulge that. And will this have an implication on fees? So cutting right to the core there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So firstly, thank you for applying to Exeter. And hopefully you'll be joining us in September. In terms of the declaration that many universities have done, most universities have declared that we're going for the blended learning, which is the mixture of the face-to-face mini lectures or seminars or tutorials and some online content. Now, as you heard at the start, that's not that different to what we used to do. We've always recorded our lectures. We have a recap service where students can watch the lectures backwards, back after having attended them, and be able to extract further information from the lectures itself. So it's not a huge change to what we have done in the past. The big change will be that, for example, our largest lecture theatre has 450 seats. There is no way that we can do social distancing in a large lecture theatre with 450 people. It's just physically impossible. And our main aim is to make sure that you remain safe and secure, and that we provide a positive environment for you to be able to succeed in your first year. So those lectures won't happen. Those lectures, the large 450, won't continue as they have in the past. What will happen instead is that the smaller tutorials, the smaller seminars, our seminars, for example, will have had 25 students at a time. What will happen there is that those will happen 2 or 3 times rather than just one. And rather than having 25 students in a room, we may just have 10, but they will run 3 times in a day. So what you're seeing there is, and if you start thinking about, well, what's the implications for the university in running it this way? You're seeing the university having to invest in digital resource because it's not going to be good enough just to be able to deliver an online lecture where someone sits in front of a screen and talks at you for an hour or 2 hours. You're going to turn around and say, that's not what I'm paying for, and quite rightly so. So we're seeing an additional expense in having to, our digital output having to be different so that we provide a high quality digital output, But in addition to that, there are additional expenses from the university side in running those seminars 2 and 3 times as opposed to the ones that they would have done. So whereas a lot of students quite rightly think, well, hang on a second, the service you're going to provide is going to be slightly less, it's actually the complete opposite. You're getting a much more in-depth and hopefully exciting and integrated online digital delivery. Plus then you're getting the smaller seminars and tutorials still running, but more often. So you're getting that. We then also look at the additional expenses in relation to, you know, we understand that coming to university isn't just the academic side. So there's also the social element. Now, a lot of the work that's happening at the moment at universities is exploring and putting plans in place to ensure that your experience, not just on the academic, but also the social side, continues to be that sort of standard that you expect it to be. So some of it may be digitally online. For example, Freshers Week, a lot of it will be a digital experience. Some of it will be face-to-face. And we think of our sports. We're working to ensure that all our sports programs, for example, can be rolled out in a way that it adheres to government guidance. Easy to do for things like football and hockey, much harder to do if you're interested in rowing. How do we stretch a boat out and make sure that we keep people, it used to be 2 meters, now it's slightly less, but how do we do that? So there are lots of groups working on that to ensure that these same experiences, the same opportunities exist. So in answer to the fees question, it actually, we don't, and the regulator for universities has said that they expect all universities to continue to charge the full fees, but it is actually going into a good use, maximizing all of the opportunities that we have to be able to provide you that experience.
Great, thank you very much, Karl. We've just got another question, thinking about science subjects in particular, asking if practical sessions in science subjects will be run in the same way, in labs, those kind of practicals. How, I mean, that must be quite a logistical feat to work out that.
So it is our intention to continue to run labs in a very safe manner. Now, we're still working on that, and obviously guidance has changed from even last week to this week. So we're working on how we actually develop and provide those lab experiences for students. Again, it will entail smaller classes. So in order to ensure that that distance can exist, there are some methods that are quite easy to implement. You can put perspex screens between lab desks, and that's one of the ways which you can actually protect individuals from ensure that we provide that safe environment. So there are lots of measures that can be done to ensure that you continue to get that experience, but that we also provide that safe environment for students. And that's what you will find when you come to university in September, that the experience will hopefully be mirror what we have delivered in the past, but in a very safe way to ensure that you keep sort of safe and healthy. And that's what we envisage happening.
We've got another question, again to you, Karl. I'm sorry, Andrew, we will come to gap year stuff shortly, I'm sure, about accommodation. And actually, I've got a son going to university this September too. And how at Exeter will you organise the accommodation? I imagine, well, I know a lot of universities have had to plough a lot of money into reorganising things. Is that something that you're looking at as well, Karl?
Absolutely. So again, in terms of accommodation, it is providing that safe environment for students to be able to live and to feel that they are safe. Luckily, in terms of accommodation, there are a few things that work in our favour. The first is that the way the buildings are structured, they are normally self-contained smaller flats. So if you think about, there's been a lot of talk, and I'm not saying that we're doing this, but there's been a lot of talk about bubbles being created within social networks at university. But actually in a flat itself, where you have 6 or 7 people sharing a kitchen or sharing a facilities, you're creating that automatic bubble of students already. And we are advantaged in that place that most of our accommodation is in these self-contained flats. They're still blocks, but they are individual floors with students already in these smaller bubbles. Where we don't have that, and we think of the, for example, the larger halls of residence where we share catered facilities, and that poses a little bit more of a problem. We are devising measures, or we're putting measures into place so that you don't have 400 people all gathered in one dining room at one single point in time. So it may be a phased catered area so that students are able to social distance rather than put everybody into one room, which would just defeat the purpose of the exercise that we're going through. So certainly the plans haven't been finalized yet, and they are still working on that, but there are already in our sort of setup a way that adheres to the social distancing and adheres to the guidance that we have. Most of our rooms all have wash basins in the rooms. Many of them have their own showers and toilet facilities. So you already have quite a lot of facilities to ensure that you maintain sort of safety, which is our primary concern.
Thank you, Karl. Just a couple of questions. One regarding gap years. In view of possible, rise in insurance, are you expecting gap years to become more expensive over the next couple of years, 3 years, going forward?
I think it's jolly difficult to say, to be perfectly honest. As far as we're concerned, we don't see any. I mean, airline costs, of course, flight costs, of course, might go up. Who knows? But apart from that, no, I don't necessarily see so. A big problem for a lot of us operating overseas is the foreign exchange issue, because of course we're operating in countries which are heavily dependent, based upon dollar costs. So in a way, after the Brexit thing, in a way we've sort of taken a hit already. So I don't envisage cost going. Travel insurance, I suppose that might go up, but it's a relatively small part, depending on the activities you're going to be doing, of course. But it's a relatively small part of the overall cost, I would say. So no, I don't see a huge rise.
Thank you. That's great. And another question about clearing, actually. Very, very sensible question. To what extent does gaining a place through clearing affect one's chance of being offered university accommodation in halls of residence? And I know you'll speak in a minute for Exeter, Karl, I hope, but certainly, that is one of the drawbacks of going through clearing or changing your university through clearing. If you're holding a firm acceptance right now, then you will probably be choosing your first choice of accommodation now, and it gives time for universities to slot you in and to get it sorted out. If you go through clearing, it tends to be more difficult. Obviously, it might be the case that fewer international students joining us in September might make that slightly easier, but it's a guessing game really at this stage. Karl, do you have anything particular to add about Exeter?
Yeah, so in terms of Exeter, the way we do this, we guarantee all first years a place in the university owned or managed accommodation if you apply by the 31st of July. So obviously that's before clearing takes place. Now, at clearing, we have accommodation officers who will work with students to ensure that we find suitable accommodation. So one of the things we're not going to do is we're not going to just drop in the deep end and say, oh, well, this is your problem. Why do we not do that? It's because we want you to have a positive experience. And if you're not happy, and if you're not happy in terms of the accommodation, where you live, that means you're not going to be happy at university. And if you're not happy at university, it means you're not having the positive experience that we want you to have. So we have staff in place that will really help you, both in terms of seeking opportunities within the university itself, if we have places, as has been said, in terms of perhaps less international students coming over for September, or if that isn't possible, we work with third-party providers who are in the city itself, and we work very closely with them to try to offer accommodation to everybody who needs accommodation within the city with other partners. So certainly we're not going to just leave you and say this is your problem. That's not the way we work. We want to make sure that you have the transition from where you are now to starting in September goes as smooth as possible.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there's a follow-up question about accommodation, so I'll just ask that. So are you thinking of organising accommodation by subject, so students work and socialise together to help with bubbles? Usually, obviously, students are put together from many different subjects, and that's one of the joys of university. It's quite interesting to think about the way a flat could feel if it's just one particular. But there are some subjects I would love to be in, and some I wouldn't. I'm not sure I'd like so much, But anyway, over to you, Karl. What do you think?
I won't ask you to comment which subjects you're thinking about. In terms of the bubbles, I referred to that because there was a BBC News article a couple of weeks ago talking about this,
yes,
and how they perceived that some universities were going down that route where they were going to group individuals depending on the discipline and depending on the subject. It's not something that at Exeter we are thinking about at the moment in terms of implementing. So we don't think that we will put all like subjects together, precisely for the reason you mentioned, that coming to university and the experience we hope we offer you is meeting people from diverse backgrounds, meeting people from diverse interests, meeting people from diverse subject knowledge. And you won't get that if you are all grouped together from the same subject. So we don't think we will go down that route. Things may change, and things change on a week-by-week basis at the moment. But certainly we don't think that is something that we will need to enforce and implement in September.
Yes, yeah.
I think as well, just to jump in if that's okay, just to say that we're so used to doing everything through UCAS at this point, which is totally understandable because all those applications have been through that system. But if you are unsure about what your accommodation might look like or what the university that you've applied to's policy might be, absolutely nothing wrong, and it's to be encouraged. Make direct contact with them and talk to them and have those conversations with them. It's not necessarily something that UCAS will be able to provide you an answer with. That's not maybe their role. But if you've got a firm choice, you've got some offers, get in touch with those universities and ask those questions of them. They're not anything to be intimidated by and frightened by. And sometimes students think, if I get in touch with my university and ask them a question, it might affect my chances. And still trying to play a bit of a game, and I'm sure everyone here would agree that that's not anything like the situation. As Karl said, all universities, I would imagine, would be much happier knowing that you were going to that university confidently, because as he said, they want you to have a good time. They don't want you to leave. They don't want you to drop out because of any reason that they can control. So do get into a dialogue with universities and know what you're stepping into, especially this year, before you go, I would say. Yeah.
I'll add to that very quickly. We do have on our website, and many universities will do this, 360 tours of rooms, so you can actually go into a sample room that you'll be in the accommodation block, and you can see what it'll be like. And you also have opportunities to be able to engage with current students. So they are students who are on our websites using things like UniBuddy, which is a platform that you can just type whatever question you want, and the student will tell it as it is. Whereas there's a acceptance, I'm sure, from the audience that I'm being paid today by the University of Exeter to toe the party line. A student won't do that. A student will tell you the true story and say, look, this is what accommodation block is like, this is what the offering is like, this is what it looks like. So make use of those facilities, make use of that, because they're free. They're all on our website, so you can just type messages direct and they'll respond to you.
Thank you, Karl. That's a really good point. A couple of questions for you, Andrew. One is to do with your connections in Africa and Asia. Do you have a sense of how prepared they are for changes when travel opens up again? Is there a confidence that you would be able to get moving on that quite quickly?
The short answer is yes. So obviously we don't know what local regulations might be. If you say the difference between Kenya and Tanzania or Nepal or whatever. So no, obviously we don't know. But all of the people that we have operating on the ground are local people who have been there for many years, if they are not, you know, born and bred there. And so I am confident. We've had to deal with all sorts of incidents of one sort or another, should we say, over the years. So I am confident that we will be able to operate. But of course, it will depend upon what the authorities are saying at a later stage. Because obviously a lot of these countries at the moment, they're locked down from a flight point of view. So again, I'm afraid we just have to watch this space.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And just another question kind of related to that from a student. In terms of insurance, is it likely that insurance will cover COVID to any extent at all, or she's asking if there are any words or phrases that she would need to look out for that would cover everywhere being shut down again?
I think that's a jolly good question, and I can't answer for the insurance industry, and we all, well, I've told you what I think of insurers, but you know, there are a lot of operators in the travel insurance market, and I don't envisage it being a problem, provided one, you know, a key measure for us is what the Foreign and Commonwealth Office is saying.
Yes.
So we will not send people into areas of countries if they're advising against travel to that area. And so if there is that sort of warning, then we won't be able to go anyway. And if again, from an insurance point of view, if people are in that country already and that advice changes, their insurance is still valid. It's if you go into that area or country.
Yeah.
So I don't see it being a huge problem.
Thank you. We've got another question, one for you, Karl, and actually it really takes me back to much more normal days. How much flexibility is there to switch a course after starting, perhaps within a broadly similar discipline?
Okay, so there is some flexibility in relation to trying to, or wishing to swap course, but there are certain caveats that I need to throw into there. The first is obviously when you want to do that. So if you wait 6-9 months down the line, there'll be questions there about, look, how much have you missed? Are you looking at just transferring from your first year to second year, or how that works? The other bit is about specific subject requirements that may be in play. So for example, if you want to do an engineering course, you may need an A in mathematics in order to gain that. If you don't carry that in your bag, and if you don't have that, then it's harder to do transfers from one to another. But if it is within the same broad field and the same subject, and there are places, then normally there are opportunities to be able to transfer from one course to the other. And certainly, again, it's going back to the whole emphasis of what is it that we want? We want students to be happy, and if you're not happy in the course you're doing, we want you to find something that you're going to be happy doing. Otherwise, chances are that you're not going to do as well as you could. So it's very much trying to find those opportunities for you.
Great, thank you. And we've come to the end of the questions. So if anybody has another question, do type it in, or if you start speaking, your face will appear and you can ask a question face to face. Is there, Karl and Andrew, are there any other comments that you feel would be useful to make as we draw this session to a close? In the last 10 minutes or so.
I wouldn't mind making one point, because a lot of people do say, you know, sometimes think of a gap year for people who haven't got the grades that they might have got, and that therefore they're thinking different. Now, I mean, I know I would say this, wouldn't I? But we believe very strongly that a gap year is good for anybody. So it isn't just a question for people. So I don't like people to think about, you know, I'm going on a gap year because I failed. I failed to get the grades I wanted, and I'm going to. In my view, in our view, it is a good experience and a window of opportunity that will close. And we believe that they will actually get more out of their university. So when they go down to Exeter afterwards, our argument is that they will actually get more out of the experience.
Yeah, yes. And, you know, we have students come back speaking to the lower sixth quite often at the beginning of September, so before they go to university, talking about their gap year. And it is really interesting to see what a kind of blossoming has taken place in terms of confidence and the skills they've developed and the usefulness that they feel about themselves. And we've had many girls, as you know, Andrew, do AV over the years, and I think in particular the work that you get them to do with the community really builds all sorts of fabulous qualities that are incredibly useful for the future. Karl, anything you'd like to add in these last?
My only additional comment would be the key message I'd want you to take away today is that of reassurance. And that's about what it is the universities, not just Exeter, but across the sector, are doing in order to address and adjust to the different circumstances that we may be operating in September. Our key overriding aim is to make sure that every student that comes to us operates in a safe environment, and that's the first overriding factor that we have for our students. But the second one is also to ensure that the experience that you get and the opportunities that you get through coming to university still match what they would have been last year, the year before, and what they may have been 2 or 3 years' time. So certainly looking at that, there are loads of media reports out there about lots of different stories and how everything's going to be different. The reality is that in most cases, we don't know. We don't know because this is continuously evolving on a day by day. But what we do know is that our entire workforce, and we're not closed, we're not on site, as you can probably tell, but we're not closed, we're all at home. The entire workforce is working to ensure that come September, when we start accepting new students onto our campuses, that experience mirrors what previous experiences have been, and the opportunities that you get and the quality of that student experience matches previous years. So certainly that reassurance that that's all been taken care of and will be in place.
Wonderful, thank you, Karl, thank you. So if there aren't any other questions, and David, if you haven't got anything to add, I think we will carry on.
Just very, very quickly say, if I may, that this is a tremendous opportunity to go and spread your wings and to follow your dreams and your passions and to become the person in the world that you want to be. And it's a strange feeling for us because you leave us and we sort of want you to go at the same time as not wanting you to leave. But what I want to say is, once you've gone, whether you're into a gap year or whether you are in your first year at university, in different ways, you'll have lots of voices around you and lots of support around you from different people. Please don't forget Bethan and I, because we're still here for you and we're regularly in contact and helping students that have left us wherever they've gone to. And I hate for you to think that this is we're not still here for you, certainly for advice and help and a cup of tea when the world allows.
Here. Always lovely to hear from girls who've left and come back. Great. Well, thank you so much, Karl and Andrew, for your input. It's really invaluable to have you here. I feel very privileged actually to be able to pass on questions to you both. Thank you to our people who ask questions and seeing you all here on Zoom as well. I hope you found it useful. And obviously, if any of you have questions, feel free to email me or to email David, and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay, so I will say goodbye to you at that point, and I would love actually just to catch up with Karl and Andrew. So I hope you won't leave. But other than that, I will say goodbye. Cheerio.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.